Today we discover a story where a quiet life is shattered by an extraordinary secret. Samuel Washington, a humble hospital worker, loses his beloved wife Lorraine, only to find she's left behind not just memories, but a hidden fortune meant to change the world. Shock turns to courage as Samuel faces elite families, social prejudice, and the pressures surrounding his son's high-stakes wedding. In a breathtaking moment, dignity triumphs over wealth, reshaping relationships and forging an unforgettable legacy. Lorraine's fortune becomes a force for good, sparking a foundation that lifts children and unites communities. Grief gives way to hope, as ordinary routines transform into lifelong impact, and one small family's love ripples through an entire city. Subscribe and hit like. Our powerful stories add years to your life. Join our Story Lovers Club and let us know in the comments, where are you listening from? Imagine you're building your dream house, brick by brick, in a world that tells you you're only ever meant to be someone's foundation builder, never the one living in the penthouse suite. That was me, a young black woman with stars in her eyes and ambition deep in her bones, convinced that if I did everything right, love would repay me in kindness. I didn't know then that sometimes life tears you down, not to break you, but to rebuild you into something unbreakable. This is not just a story of hard lessons and heartbreak. It's a roadmap, a lifeline for every woman who's ever been called too dark, too big, too small, or simply not enough. It's a love letter to the one listening in the dark, wondering if her light will ever shine again, and a war cry for sisters everywhere who need to know that their worth is not measured by who chooses them, but by how fiercely they reclaim themselves. So buckle in, because this is how I became the architect of my own happy ending. My name is Angela, and this is not just my story. It's a story for every woman who's ever had to learn to love herself when all the world handed her was scraps. Before we go further, can you do me a quick favor? Tap subscribe, hit like, and share your country in the comments. I want to know how far this story travels, and I hope it finds every woman who needs it. Let's rewind. When I met Charles, I was 23, fresh out of college, clutching a fashion design degree like it was a magic ticket, living in a shoebox Atlanta apartment, packed with dreams and more fabric scraps than furniture. Charles, he was 25, tall, dark, with the kind of smile that made you feel like the only one in a noisy room. He was working in sales and truly could have sold snow to a polar bear. The kind of man who made you believe every syrupy sweet word he said. We laughed over plates of fried chicken and collard greens on our first date at a tiny soul food spot, while he asked about my dreams, like he actually intended to remember every answer. When I gushed about launching my own fashion line, bracing for the usual "fashion's too hard," he just grinned and said, "When you make it, I'll be able to say I knew her before she was famous. Not if, when." Looking back, that was the first hint. This man was smooth with words. A little too smooth, maybe. Still, for 2 years we dated and played house in our heads, talking about the future like it was already signed and sealed. He fit in so well at family gatherings, charming my parents, remembering my friends' names, joking just enough to feel like kin. He was the man everyone hoped would stay. "We'll have beautiful babies," he'd say during soft, secret moments, tracing circles on my skin as if our life together was destiny. We'd spin stories about the kids who'd have his smile and my wit. 2 boys and a girl, a house with a worn porch, scented with Sunday dinners and laughter. I could practically touch that life. Our babies tumbling in the grass, Charles hollering advice from the sidelines, while I taught our daughter to sew. It was so real, I thought maybe I was manifesting it into existence. But the gap between fantasy and reality is sometimes a canyon, waiting for one wrong footstep. That day, I saw 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test. My heart leaped and plummeted in the same breath. Fear mingled with hope. Maybe this was our beginning, the real one. I spent 3 days obsessing over how to tell Charles, picturing every reveal. Should I wrap the test? Surprise him with dinner? Just blurt it out? In the end, I kept it simple. One night, cuddled on my worn couch, I looked him in the eyes and said, "Charles, I'm pregnant." The sitcom on TV kept laughing, but the air went dead. He looked at me like I'd told him the apartment was on fire, like pregnancy was a plot twist he hadn't signed up for. "Are you sure?" he finally croaked. "Yes, 3 different tests." He nodded, but instead of joy or even fear, his answer was flat. "Well, we'll figure it out." Those words echoed in the space between us. Not, "I'm so happy," not, "we're in this together," just an uncertain, measured, "we'll figure it out." Looking back, I can almost hear the warning bells, red flags the size of blankets, waving right in my face. But love makes you a magician of excuses. Maybe he was shocked. Maybe he needed time. Maybe. But when you build your dreams around someone, even their silence can be explained away by hope. The days after that conversation stretched endlessly. He was there, but less so, like a shadow of himself, polite but absent, making small talk as if careful not to upset a fragile truce. Our old rhythm was gone. Goodbye kisses felt perfunctory, hollow. It was as if he was slipping through my fingers, and I was too scared to tighten my grip. I thought telling our families would make it real for him, solidify our togetherness. I invited my parents for dinner. "Nothing's wrong, Mama. Just come Saturday, please." I kicked all day, making every comfort food I could think of, arranged the small table like it was our first Christmas. Charles helped, but his eyes wandered, his mind clearly somewhere far away. "You okay, baby?" I asked, arranging forks side by side. "I'm fine, just thinking." When my parents arrived, the apartment hummed with awkward energy. My dad hugged Charles like a son, and my mother complimented the food. Normal for a while. But then, the moment I'd rehearsed, "Charles and I have something to tell you," I said, hands shaking under the table as I reached for his. "We're having a baby." The silence was immediate, heavy, expectant. Mama's face twisted through a slideshow of feelings. Daddy's went blank and cold. "Pregnant?" he said, as if challenging the word to a duel. "Yes, sir. And you're getting married when? Charles stared into his lap. We haven't talked about that yet, I said. Daddy's fork hit his plate like a gavel. Haven't talked about it yet. Boy, he said to Charles, you got something to say? Charles stammered something about processing, and I sat there, feeling the two most important men in my life decide my future in a language thick with disappointment. My father unleashed a storm. Processing? My daughter is carrying your child. That child deserves a name, a home. You need to decide if you're going to be a man about this or not. Charles mumbled his intention to step up, but sounded like he was reciting lines at a play he hadn't auditioned for. When's the wedding? Daddy pressed. Charles's silence was deafening. My daughter ain't having no baby out of wedlock, not under my roof. My mother wrung her hands, her eyes darting between us. The room vibrated with shame and fear and pressure. I tried to broker peace, but Daddy wouldn't stop. You can bring me a man proud to marry you, or you can pack your things and find somewhere else to live. I won't support unwed mothers. It landed like a slap. I wanted to protest, plead my case, show them that their love for me shouldn't hinge on Charles's decisions. But Daddy's disappointment was like a locked door, and Mama just teared up, unable or unwilling to defend me. The night ended with my parents leaving, food untouched. My mother's whispered, "Pray about it," lingering in the entryway. Charles and I sat in silence until I finally asked, "What are we going to do?" His answer was as hollow as ever. I don't know. We should have called it then. But fear of loneliness kept me grasping. I was terrified of being a single mother, of being a disappointment, of building a life in pieces when all I ever wanted was wholeness. Days slipped by in a haze. Charles called, came over, but didn't look at me properly. I started getting calls from my parents, now demanding answers instead of giving support. "Has he proposed yet?" Mama would ask, as if a ring could magically fix everything. "Not yet." "Well, what's he waiting for?" "The damage is done." Those words stuck like a burr. 3 days after the disastrous dinner, Daddy called with an ultimatum. "You have until Sunday to bring me a man ready to do right by you. If you can't do that, you need to find somewhere else to live." I tried to reason with him. "You'd throw me out? You want grown woman choices? You handle grown woman consequences." Sunday was 4 days away. 4 days to convince a man who wasn't sure he wanted me to pretend everything was fine. Charles stonewalled. "I just need to think." But deep down, I knew love shouldn't take this much convincing, shouldn't feel like begging for leftovers. Sunday came. No proposal, no promises. My parents packed my things and set them by the door. My mother wept. My father didn't waver. I stood in the street, suitcases at my feet, stomach turning, literally carrying the weight of hope and disappointment. When I called Charles, he hesitated. "I guess you can crash here until you find a place," he said. As if I were a stray he felt obligated to take in. Not, "We'll find a home," just a place for you. I moved into his bachelor apartment. 2 drawers, half a closet, no promises. Living with Charles should have been a new chapter, but every day felt more like a footnote, an afterthought in the story I thought we were writing together. His small apartment, once the stage for his laughter and late-night music, became a holding cell where dreams went to dim. I tried to make it a home, set flowers on the counter, a towel just for him, sticky notes with sweet promises meant to keep the last of our affection alive. But comfort is hard to find when you're made to feel like a guest, not a partner. My things stayed packed in bags for weeks. His shoes by the door were the only sign of permanence. Mine looked as temporary as the arrangement felt. Charles returned home late, the rhythm of his keys in the lock no longer a signal for joy, but a summons for another tense silence. We tiptoed around each other, speaking only of errands or bills, but never the giant, silent question in the room. What are we now? Some nights, I'd hear him on the phone in the next room, voice low, laughter in a register I barely recognized. I wanted to ask him if he still loved me, or if he ever really did. But every time the words reached my lips, I swallowed them back, ashamed of how desperate I was for reassurance. My body changed as the baby grew. My world contracted to the four walls of the apartment and the echo of conversations I'd never had the courage to start. There were moments, brief, fragile, when Charles would reach out and touch my belly, a hesitant smile on his lips, wonder flickering in his eyes. But just as quickly as those moments came, they passed into shadows, replaced by uncomfortable silences or rushed exits. Sometimes I would stand in the bathroom, hand on the sink, and stare at myself in the mirror, eyes dull, cheeks pale, dreams draining away. I'd tell myself to be strong, to wait it out, that things would get better. But the cracks were widening every day, and soon the dam would burst. One early afternoon, I came home from a doctor's appointment, clutching the first picture of our baby. Tiny, blurry, but so full of promise, it hurt to breathe. I wanted to show Charles, to let him be the first to see what we'd made together. I found him at the kitchen counter, scrolling aimlessly through his phone, mind adrift. "Look," I said, offering the ultrasound like a peace treaty. He glanced up, took the photo, stared for barely a second, and set it aside. "That's nice," he muttered, almost as if talking to himself. My heart broke in that instant, not with a crash, but with the sharp, sickening sound of a final thread snapping. We argued, again. I begged for honesty, demanded to know what he truly wanted. Did he see a future with me and our child? Or was he counting the days until obligation could become freedom? He didn't answer directly, couldn't even look me in the eye. I realized the truth as it poured out of me. Tears, anger, all the words I'd held inside since the day he first sat silent on the couch. "This isn't love," I said, voice trembling. "You don't have to pretend anymore." For a heartbeat, I thought he'd fight for us, but instead he turned away, shoulders tense. "I'm sorry," he whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. No excuses, no arguments, just defeat. The fight was over, and we had both lost. That night, I lay on his side of the bed, faced with the vast coldness where comfort once lived, and decided for the first time that maybe it was time to stop apologizing for wanting more. Leaving wasn't easy. It never is, especially with a child growing inside you. Each step away from the life you thought you wanted feels like a betrayal of hope. I packed slowly, folding dreams alongside outfits, tucking away old love notes and faded photographs into a single battered suitcase. Charles didn't stop me. He didn't help either. His silence was the answer I needed, a confirmation that he was as relieved as I was heartbroken. I moved in with my friend Tamika, someone who loved me without condition, without keeping score. The first night she made us tea, drew a blanket over my legs, and let me cry. No judgment, just the comfort of friendship that refused to let shame take root. "Girl, you got this," she said. "Your life ain't over, it's just shifting gears." The relief was immediate, a weight off my chest, air returning to my lungs after months of tension. For the first time in months, I slept through the night, peace settling in where anxiety used to coil. Tamika helped me breathe again, helped me realize that my story wasn't ending. It was beginning anew, on my terms. I started therapy, sat in rooms full of laughter and confession, learning to understand that my value was not tied to a man's willingness to stay. My baby grew inside me, healthy and strong, a constant reminder that love could survive even the roughest soil. I began to love myself again, piece by fragile piece. The months that followed were a mosaic of struggle and surprising joy. I found a job as an assistant at a local boutique, stitching other people's dreams while quietly mending my own. Every paycheck felt like a line in the sand, proof that I could stand on my own. My belly grew round, a badge of honor, a promise to a future I was determined to make beautiful. My parents called, at first in anger, then in softening concern. Mama apologized for pushing so hard, for forgetting to listen instead of just lecturing. Daddy took longer to come around, pride slow to yield to forgiveness. But after my baby shower, he hugged me tight, holding back tears. "You're stronger than I ever was, Angie," he whispered. I forgave them. They were learning too. As my due date neared, Charles reached out tentatively, asking if he could be part of the baby's life. The hurt hadn't fully faded, but I agreed. My child deserved a father, even if my heart knew we were better apart. Boundaries were set, new relationships negotiated, all for the sake of something bigger than both our wounds. With Tamika's help and the support of a growing tribe of friends who understood the currency of grace, I rebuilt my confidence. I learned to cherish my own company, find beauty in being enough for myself and my child. The future I thought I lost had been waiting for me to claim it all along. When my daughter, my beautiful, wild-eyed miracle, was born, the world changed again. I held her, sobbing, both of us wailing with the shock and beauty of new life. All the pain, the loneliness, the nights spent second-guessing, evaporated in a single moment of perfect, impossible love. I named her Hope. Hope had her father's lashes and my smile, but she was all her own, a force of nature, a daily lesson in resilience and forgiveness. Charles visited, slow at first, then more steady, learning how to be the father he'd failed to be the partner. We found our rhythm as co-parents, awkward, sometimes messy, always for her. Lessons bloom. Hope taught me to trust myself, the future, the possibility of joy where I least expected it. I started taking night classes, determined to relaunch my fashion dreams, fueled by the knowledge that I'd already survived the hardest chapters. Tamika became godmother. My parents doted, and even Charles, in his imperfect way, showed up for our little girl. Sometimes, at night, I'd look out my window, Hope snuffling quietly in her sleep, and realize that the foundation I was forced to build on my own was stronger, safer, and more honest than any castle made of lies. I wasn't broken. I was reborn. And that, more than anything, was my happy ending. With Hope nestled safely in my arms, I began to understand just how many silent witnesses there were to my journey. Friends from college, old classmates, even distant cousins started reaching out. Women who had seen the Facebook updates, the changing relationship status, the baby pictures. Some simply sent congratulations, but others brought their own confessions, similar heartbreaks, hard choices, the sting of familial shame. What surprised me most was how sharing my struggle had ignited a kind of quiet courage among women I barely knew. One messaged at midnight to say she'd finally left a boyfriend who thought love meant keeping score. Another confessed that, for the first time, she saw her own worth reflected in someone else's story, and dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to settle for less. These stories came in ripples, some gentle, some tidal, but all with the same message. Sometimes what breaks you, if you let it, becomes the thing that sets someone else free. I was learning, too, that letting go is never just a one-time decision. Healing is not a straight road. It zigs and zags, circling back before moving forward. There were days I caught myself thinking about Charles, not with bitterness, but with empathy, for the weight of his own fears, his upbringing, the expectations that shackled him too. We were, each in our own way, products of stories passed down. Women told to shrink, men told to shoulder alone. So I forgave him, not for his sake, but for mine. Forgiveness isn't a free pass. It's a quiet revolution inside, a personal declaration that the pain will not write the ending. My pain found purpose in that forgiveness, and the courage I learned to carry became the legacy I wanted for Hope above all. Even with Hope's arrival and newfound peace, life was far from easy. There were sleepless nights, bottles to clean, and bills that seemed to multiply just to keep things interesting. But in the quiet, in those tiny pockets of time, when it was just me and my thoughts, I began the real work. Learning to love myself, not for what I survived, but for who I had always been beneath the scars and bravado. Therapy became my sanctuary. Week by week, I unraveled old narratives, the ones that said I had to earn my spot, to prove myself good enough for love that stayed. My therapist, Mrs. Caldwell, an older black woman with fierce eyes and a gentle voice, taught me how to sift through the debris. "You are not the sum of what men can or cannot give you," she'd say. "You are the sum of every time you chose to keep going anyway." I wrote letters, some to Charles, never sent, and some to my younger self, apologizing for the years I'd spent believing myself unworthy. I made peace with the little girl who wanted to be seen, who dreamed up weddings and happy endings, and promised her something better, a life not defined by someone else's acceptance, but by her own. Slowly, I started putting myself first in small ways, reclaiming my time for creative projects, signing up for business classes online, letting Tamika babysit while I painted or went to the movies alone. These weren't grand gestures, but defiant acts of self-preservation, enough to remind myself that joy was possible, even and especially after heartbreak. Time, I learned, is both a healer and a test. Each month, hope grew and changed, becoming a living reminder of possibility. Her first steps across Tamika's cluttered living room brought a joy so powerful, I sobbed. Laughter and tears tangled together. Milestones multiplied. The first giggle, the first word, the first time she clung to my neck as if I was her whole world. As hope flourished, I found myself mediating new boundaries with Charles. Co-parenting was rarely easy. Sometimes resentment surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. But we kept the promises made to Hope, learning to set aside our issues for her sake. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes it wasn't even good. But it was necessary. Each drop-off and birthday party became proof of our growth, individually and together. My parents, too, evolved in their roles. Mama emerged as Hope's fiercest advocate, doting on her with all the love she'd once withheld from me in moments of disappointment. Daddy transformed from stern judge to doting grandfather, teaching Hope to tie shoelaces and telling her stories from his childhood in Alabama. Their home became our haven, a place where forgiveness softened old wounds and new memories could take root. I watched the same people who once judged me for not fitting the mold become the architects of a new family dynamic, one built on acceptance and second chances. We created traditions, Sunday dinners, story nights, day trips to the park. Each small ritual was a brick in the bridge between my painful past and a hopeful future for us all. With Hope steady on her feet, I turned my focus back to the dreams left on hold. My degree in fashion design, once a sad reminder of deferred ambitions, became my ticket to independence. I spent nights at my sewing machine, fabric pooling in my lap, as I created clothes for women who wanted to be seen, really seen, in colors and shapes that reflected their joy and strength. I launched my online boutique in the quiet hours while Hope slept, using every inch of Tamika's small dining table as my workspace. Orders trickled in, then grew, as word spread among a community hungry for authenticity. My designs were bold, floral prints, vibrant colors, unapologetic lines. Each piece was my love letter to women who had weathered storms, a way of saying, you are worthy of beauty, no matter where you've been. Balancing motherhood and entrepreneurship was a juggling act. There were days when exhaustion threatened to drag me under, and nights when the only thing keeping me going was a stubborn, unkillable hope. But every sale, every happy customer, every message from a woman who felt powerful in my clothes filled the cracks in my self-esteem. I was no longer building castles for someone else to inherit. I was constructing my own, one stitch at a time. Hope watched me work, her tiny hands trailing over fabric scraps, her laughter ringing out even on the hardest days. She was learning too, not just how to persevere, but how to believe in her own magic, her own right to take up space in a world that sometimes felt too small. Success, even humble, drew women into my circle the way light draws the morning. My boutique became more than a business. It was a gathering place, real and virtual, for women with similar stories. I hosted sister circles every month, both online and in person, at Tamika's now crowded apartment. Women brought their laughter, their pain, their dreams. Some came for style advice, others for the safety of shared experience. We became a tribe, a living, breathing testament to the fact that broken hearts could become stronger in good company. We shared job leads, childcare tips, recipes, memories of lost loves, and visions of futures not yet written. I watched friendships blossom between single mothers, widows, even women bravely working to repair marriages they'd once believed hopeless. Through every conversation, every embrace, I felt the truth solidify in me. None of us had to do this alone. My social media filled with messages, some from women continents away, thanking me for sharing, for proving that vulnerability can be power. The story that began with a loss was now a beacon for others, a torch passed hand to hand, lighting up dark places. My identity, once tied so tightly to loss and regret, grew into something luminous. I found deep pride in being Hope's mother, Tamika's friend, my parents' daughter, but also in being Angela, a woman finally, fiercely, in the business of loving herself. Every day, as I woke to sunlight pouring through the curtains and Hope's small voice calling for her morning hug, I realized more and more how my life had transformed from within. What had begun as a story of loss and exile, a tale written in the margins of someone else's decisions, had become my own symphony, louder, bolder, and entirely mine. The experience of starting over did not erase the scars, but it did teach me resilience, that softly stubborn bone that bends but does not break. Through the rhythm of our new days, I marveled at my own strength. Simple acts, walking Hope to preschool, negotiating new contracts for my boutique, building a routine out of the chaos, became victories. Lessons bloom. Each morning, I set intentions for myself and my daughter, whispering softly while she brushed her teeth. You can do hard things. You can love yourself even when the world doesn't understand you. These words were for her, but sometimes I needed them even more than she did. Hope blossomed in this garden of second chances. She was unworried by our makeshift beginnings, the thrifted furniture, mismatched towels, hand-me-down toys. To her, home was wherever we were together. She grew into a child of endless questions and unfiltered joy, her confidence transparent, and her trust in the world intact. She reminded me, on the hardest afternoons, that joy truly can return to ground once scorched by disappointment. And I, in becoming her mother and my own guardian, was reconstructing a foundation deeper than the legacy of heartbreak. The life I was building for my family was not just about survival. It was about thriving, about laughter that filled the rooms of our small apartment, and about the certainty that we were worthy of love, exactly as we were. It was inevitable. Life has a way of bringing unfinished business back to your door. One rainy October afternoon, Charles turned up unannounced, nerves tight behind an attempted smile. He was dressed in his best, clearly wanting to make an impression, and held a box of toys that seemed too bright for such a gray sky. He stood on the threshold, awkward and hesitant, asking if he could talk. I hesitated, heart pounding not out of longing, but out of old memories surging up. Still, I let him in. We sat across from each other, hope playing at our feet, oblivious to the gravity of the scene. Charles started slowly. He apologized, not the shallow, hurried kind he'd offered before, but an honest, trembling apology. He spoke of his own fear, of how he'd grown since those days, of therapy he'd started, of wanting to be a better father. I listened, not with the naive hope of old, but with the clear-sighted compassion of someone who had learned forgiveness for herself first. I thanked him, acknowledging the difficulty of his growth, but stated gently that the time for us had passed. Our relationship was not a story to be resumed, but one to be respected for what it had taught us both. Hope, curious and bright, welcomed his attempts at fatherhood. She decorated his shoes with stickers, giggled at his silly voices, and drew him pictures of our little family as she saw it. Imperfect, but still precious. I watched their bond grow, sometimes aching for what could have been, but always grateful he was stepping up, this time for her. The old wounds didn't disappear, but they became smoother, less tender to the touch. Through Charles's genuine efforts, I saw that healing doesn't always lead to restoration, but it does open doors, ones that allow light in where darkness used to dwell. There's a particular kind of peace that finds you only after the storm, when the debris has settled and you stand, blinking, in the sunlight of a new beginning. It took years, not months, but I found that peace. Lessons bloom. Friends would sometimes marvel at my optimism, as if they couldn't quite understand how someone so battered by disappointment could still believe in warmth and joy. I told them the secret isn't denying pain, but embracing it, letting it be a teacher instead of a jailer. I celebrated milestones, both big and small. Hope's first day of school, my boutique's 3rd anniversary, the first holiday spent in a home that belonged to us. I threw dinner parties for my friends, inviting women who had helped save me, or whom I had guided to safe ground in their own storms. Laughter became our favorite soundtrack. One evening, Tamika toasted me at our kitchen table, her glass raised high, to Angela, who taught us how to build castles from rubble, and to every sister who finds strength in her scars. The room erupted in applause, and for the first time, I felt not just healed, but truly celebrated, not for surviving, but for thriving. Bit by bit, I set down the burdens of shame and regret. I let myself feel proud, allowed joy to fill the rooms that sorrow had once haunted. My heart, once so focused on finding validation in someone else's eyes, began to trust its own reflection, to believe in a future of its own design. If you're listening now, dear sister, and you see yourself in my story, I want you to know this. You are not alone. There will always be voices, sometimes in your own family, sometimes from the person you love, telling you that your worth is conditional, based on what you can endure or what you can forgive. But your worth is not up for negotiation. No matter how lost you feel, no matter who walks away or fails to rise to the moment, your story is still yours to write. You are beautiful in every chapter, even when the plot twists bring tears. Your vulnerability can become the bedrock of someone else's survival, just as mine did when I finally shared my real, messy truth. It's okay to want love, to build dreams with someone, to hope for forever. But if those dreams fall through, if love asks you to shrink or hide the brightest parts of yourself, do not be afraid to begin again. The best story you will ever tell is the one where you are the hero of your own journey, not the side character in someone else's. Let your heart break if it must. Then use the pieces to pave the path forward. When you do, you will find a sisterhood waiting for you, arms open, ready to testify that endings are just disguised beginnings. Some nights, after hope is asleep and the world finally grows quiet, I look at the life we've built from the splinters of what was almost lost. I light a candle in the window, a symbol for every woman searching for home within herself. This story is not unique, but that's exactly why it matters. I pass this torch to you, in the hope that you will carry it into the darkness for someone else. Stand tall in your struggles, honor your own voice, and trust that every hard-won lesson is another brick in the sanctuary you're building. You are a creator of your worth, your legacy, your own brand of joy. Let the world watch you rise. Let them see the magic in your scars, the grace in your persistence, the beauty in the way you choose yourself again and again. This is my story, but it could be anyone's. And as I tuck hope into bed each night, whispering promises of adventure and belonging, I know the greatest message I'll ever give her is this: you are enough, as you are, where you are, with or without anyone's approval. May your story shine just as brightly. The future is yours to claim.